The quiet hum of suburban life was the soundtrack to Katherine's existence. Maplewood Drive was the kind of street where nothing ever happened, a place where the most exciting event of the week was the arrival of the recycling truck. The houses stood in neat rows, their manicured lawns glowing under the amber streetlights. Katherine had lived there for 3 years, and in that time, she had grown accustomed to the rhythm of it all. The distant bark of a dog, the occasional whir of a lawnmower, the faint scent of barbecue drifting through the air on summer evenings. It was predictable, safe, and utterly unremarkable, until it wasn't. It began on a Thursday. Katherine had been walking home from the park, her sneakers crunching against the gravel path that cut through the woods behind her house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. She liked this time of day, the way the world seemed to slow down, the way the light turned everything golden. She was lost in thought, her mind wandering as she often did, when she heard it, a sharp metallic clang like the sound of a trash can lid being dropped. It came from the direction of the Andersons' house, just 2 doors down from hers. She paused, her ears straining, but the sound didn't come again. She shrugged it off and kept walking. But as she passed the Andersons' house, something caught her eye. The front door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, she could see a sliver of darkness. That was odd. Mrs. Anderson was meticulous about keeping her doors locked. She had said so herself more than once during neighborhood watch meetings. Katherine hesitated, her footsteps slowing. She told herself it was none of her business, that she should keep walking, but something, some instinct, some faint prickle of unease made her stop. She turned and walked up the driveway, her heart beating a little faster. The door creaked as she pushed it open. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling slightly. "Mrs. Anderson? Is everything okay?" There was no answer. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy, oppressive. Katherine stepped inside, her sneakers squeaking against the polished hardwood floor. The living room was immaculate as always, but there was something off about it, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. A vase of flowers on the coffee table was tipped over, water pooling on the surface. A magazine lay open on the couch, its pages crumpled as if someone had gripped it tightly. And then she saw it, a single drop of blood on the floor, dark and glistening. Her breath caught in her throat. She told herself it could be anything, a cut, a nosebleed, but deep down she knew something was very wrong. She took a step forward, then another, her eyes scanning the room. The kitchen was to her left, the door half closed. She pushed it open, her hand trembling, and that's when she saw him. Mr. Anderson was lying on the floor, his face pale and lifeless, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. There was a knife sticking out of his chest, the handle slick with blood. Katherine's stomach lurched, and she clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. She stumbled backward, her legs giving out beneath her, and landed hard on the floor. Her mind was racing, her thoughts a jumbled mess. She had to call the police. She had to get out of there. She had to... "Katherine." The voice came from behind her, soft and calm, almost gentle. She froze, her blood turning to ice. Slowly she turned her head. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Grayson, her next-door neighbor. He was holding a knife, the blade glinting in the dim light. There was blood on his hands, on his shirt, on his face. He smiled at her, a slow, chilling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You shouldn't have come in," he said. Katherine's mind went blank. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Mr. Grayson took a step toward her, and she scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned and ran, her legs moving on their own, and burst out of the house. She didn't stop running until she reached her own front door, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fit the key into the lock. She slammed the door shut behind her and leaned against it, gasping for air. She was safe. She was home. But as she stood there, her mind racing, she realized something that made her blood run cold. Mr. Grayson had seen her. He knew she had seen him, and he knew where she lived. The next few days were a blur. Katherine barely slept, jumping at every sound, every creak of the house. She kept the curtains drawn, the doors locked, the lights off. She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? That she had seen Mr. Grayson kill Mr. Anderson? She had no proof, no evidence. And even if she did, what would stop him from coming after her? He knew where she lived. He knew her routine. He knew everything. The first sign that he was watching her came on Sunday evening. She was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when she heard a faint tapping on the window. She froze, her heart in her throat, and slowly turned around. There was nothing there, just the darkness outside, the faint reflection of her own face in the glass. She told herself it was just the wind, just her imagination, but deep down she knew. He was out there. He was watching. The next day, she found a note in her mailbox. It was written in neat, precise handwriting, the kind you might see on a birthday card. "I know you saw me," it read. "Let's keep this between us, okay?" There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She knew who it was from. The days turned into weeks, and the torment only grew worse. Katherine started seeing him everywhere, standing on the corner, sitting in his car, walking past her house. He never said anything, never did anything, but his presence was constant, suffocating. She stopped going outside, stopped answering the phone, stopped living. She was a prisoner in her own home, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. And then one night, it all came to a head. She was in the living room, curled up on the couch, when she heard a noise from the backyard. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A soft crunch of gravel, the rustle of leaves. She sat up, her heart pounding, and listened. There it was again. Someone was out there. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the buttons. The operator answered, but before Katherine could say anything, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The creak of the back door opening. She dropped the phone and ran, her mind screaming at her to move, to hide, to do something. She dashed up the stairs and into her bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. She locked it, her hands fumbling with the bolt, and then she heard it, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming up the stairs. She looked around the room, her mind racing. There was no way out, no window, no balcony, nothing. She was trapped. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped right outside her door. There was a moment of silence, and then the doorknob began to turn. Katherine backed away, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The door creaked open, and there he was, Mr. Grayson, standing in the doorway, his eyes cold and empty. He smiled at her, that same chilling smile, and took a step forward. "You shouldn't have run," he said. Katherine's mind went blank. She didn't think, didn't plan, didn't hesitate. She grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a heavy glass vase, and hurled it at him with all her strength. It hit him square in the face, and he stumbled backward, blood streaming from his nose. She didn't wait to see what happened next. She bolted past him, down the stairs, and out the front door, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop running until she reached the park, her legs giving out beneath her. She collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, her mind reeling. She was alive. She had escaped. But as she sat there, her body trembling, she realized something that made her blood run cold. She had left her phone behind, and with it, her only connection to the outside world. The night stretched on, endless and suffocating. Katherine stayed hidden in the park, her eyes darting around, her ears straining for any sound. She didn't know if Mr. Grayson was still out there, still looking for her, but she couldn't take the chance. She had to stay hidden, stay quiet, stay alive. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Katherine finally allowed herself to breathe. She was exhausted, her body aching, her mind numb, but she was alive. She had survived the night, but as she stood up, her legs trembling, she realized something that made her stomach churn. She couldn't go back. Not to her house, not to her life, not to anything. Mr. Grayson was still out there, and he would never stop looking for her. Katherine stumbled into the police station, her face pale and her hands trembling as she recounted everything she had seen. The officers listened carefully, their expressions shifting from concern to skepticism as she described the blood, the knife, and Mr. Grayson's chilling smile. They searched the Andersons' house but found nothing. No body, no blood, no signs of a struggle. The vase of flowers stood upright, the magazine neatly folded on the couch. It was as if the scene had never existed. Mr. Grayson had an alibi, and without evidence, the police dismissed Katherine's story as the product of an overactive imagination. Days later, Mr. Anderson was declared missing, presumed to have left on his own. Katherine's heart sank as she realized no one believed her, no one except Mr. Grayson, who now knew she was alone and defenseless. She moved away, changed her name, tried to start over, but no matter how far she ran, she could never escape the feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting. And every night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she wondered if she would ever truly be safe, or if one day the nightmare would find her again. If you enjoyed this bone-chilling tale of terror, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more stories that will haunt your dreams. And remember, the quiet neighbor next door might not be as ordinary as they seem. Shadows linger where you least expect them, and trust can be the deadliest mistake of all. Until next time, stay safe, if you can.